The twin suns of Terrar scorched the barren land, baking the cracked earth and turning the air into a shimmering haze. Drywell Settlement lay scattered across the desert, its crude structures made of scrap metal and salvaged ship panels. Every gust of wind carried a whisper of dust and despair. Among the rusting debris near a collapsed fence, a boy crouched with a wrench in hand, his blond hair wild as if the desert itself had shaped it. Ethan Harper, barely 12, was bent over a pile of broken tubing and old circuit boards, his face streaked with dirt and determination. "Ethan, don't wander too far from the house," called his mother, Sarah Harper. Her voice carried across the yard, taut with worry. The woman stood on the porch, shielding her eyes from the harsh light. Her figure leaned from years of rationing and hard work. "I won't, Mom," Ethan replied without looking up. His small hands worked furiously, twisting a piece of wire around. A makeshift pump. He had been at it for hours, lost in the rhythm of building something no one believed was possible. Life on Terrar had never been part of their plan. 6 years ago, his father, Commander Jack Harper, left for the Iran conflict with promises to return home quickly. That promise had been broken by the cruel words of a military transmission missing in action. Now it was just the boy and his mother, surviving on a world that barely tolerated human settlers. The settlement's water supply had grown worse each season. The communal well, once reliable, had dwindled to a muddy trickle. People spoke in hushed tones about leaving, abandoning. Drywell to the desert. Ethan's young mind refused to accept defeat. He had seen too many dreams fade since his father vanished, and he wouldn't let the same happen to the only home they had left. "What are you building now, dirt boy?" The teasing voice was light, but it made him smile before he even turned. Landara. Tinari stood at the edge of the yard, her silhouette framed by the blazing horizon. She was 16, Neridian, her lavender skin glowing faintly in the sunlight. Her long silver hair was braided in intricate loops that glinted like threads of glass. She leaned against the post fence, her violet eyes glimmering with mischief. "It's a water reclamation system," Ethan said, lifting his contraption with pride. "Or it will be when I get it working." Landara crossed her arms, her tight-fitting gray-green suit reflecting the sun's rays. "You humans and your endless tinkering. What's wrong with the communal well?" "The well's drying up and you know it," Ethan said firmly. "The elders keep talking about rationing more, but no one's doing anything real about it." She raised an eyebrow but moved closer, crouching beside him. Though older, she never treated him like a child. "And this pile of junk will save us all?" "Maybe," Ethan muttered, connecting two pieces with a satisfying click. "If I can get it working." The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fire and blood. Landara handed him tools, her teasing fading into curiosity as she studied his work. "What's this?" she asked, pointing at a small glowing blue component. "Flux capacitor," Ethan said, trying not to sound too proud. "Pulled it from an old Tresian ship in the scrap heap. You sure it's safe?" "Safe enough," he lied with a grin. Boy connected the final wires, his heart hammering. A soft hum rose from the device, lights flickering to life across its surface. Landara tilted her head, skeptical, until a thin mist began to pour from one end, condensing into droplets that collected in a small metal cup. Landara's eyes widened. "That's impossible. The air here is too dry for condensation tech to work. Not with this modification," Ethan said, voice trembling with excitement. "I reconfigured the molecular sieve to extract hydrogen and oxygen directly from the atmosphere and recombine them." She stared, awe replacing her usual sarcasm. "You're creating water. Real water." Ethan lifted the small cup, half a liter of crystal-clear liquid shimmering in the fading light. "It's not much, but it's a start." Landara's voice dropped to a whisper. "Ethan, Do you realize what you've just done? This could change everything." He looked out at the cracked earth, at the settlement barely clinging to life. For the first time in years, hope stirred like a fresh wind inside him. Then, "We need to make it bigger," he said. "Much bigger." The desert wind whistled between them as night fell, carrying the scent of dust and steel. Landara sat beside him, the cup of water between them like a miracle. Neither of them could know that this small invention would draw attention far beyond Drywell, a kind of attention that could save them or destroy them. The council hall was nothing more than a repurposed cargo container, reinforced with rust-streaked metal panels and patched windows, but tonight it felt like the most important place on Terrar. The room was crowded with settlers, humans, and Noridians alike, drawn by the whispers of a miracle. The murmurs swirled like the desert wind outside, restless and hungry for answers. At the center of it all stood Ethan Harper, clutching his makeshift water generator with both hands, his face smudged with sweat and dust but his eyes bright with determination. Elder Moran, the senior Noridian council leader, leaned forward on his staff, his silver-streaked beard gleaming in the lantern light, his violet eyes narrowed, sharp as tempered glass. "You expect us to believe this toy can create water from nothing?" His tone was skeptical, bordering on disdain. "Many have tried similar tricks. All have failed. Why should this be different?" Councilman Holt, the human representative, a broad-shouldered man with a sunburned face, raised a hand. "Let the boy show us, Moran. Our well runs dry and we have little left to lose. If he claims he can make water, then let him prove it." Ethan's palms were damp as he stepped forward. Landara stood just behind him, her presence like a quiet force of reassurance. She didn't need to speak. Her steady gaze told him what words could not. "You've got this." He set the small contraption on the council's battered table. The room went silent, the only sounds the creaking of old metal and the distant wail of wind through the settlement's broken fences. He powered it on. The generator emitted a low hum, soft but steady, like the heartbeat of the desert itself. Tiny indicator lights blinked across its patched surface. For a tense moment, nothing else happened. Ethan's stomach knotted. What if it fails now, in front of everyone? What if they call me a fool? Then a faint mist began to emerge, curling in the dim light like ghostly breath. Droplets formed, running down a funnel into the small reservoir at its base. Gasps rippled. Through the room, Councilman Holt's eyes widened as he dipped his fingers into the clear liquid. "By the stars. It's pure," he whispered. "Cleaner than the water from the well." Elder Moran's frown faltered, but he did not relent. "How much can this thing produce? This small prototype?" "About 2 liters a day," Ethan answered, his voice steady despite his thundering heartbeat. "But if we scale it up, if I can get the right parts, I can build one big enough to irrigate our crops." The council members exchanged urgent glances. For the first time in months, something like hope glimmered in the room. Holt straightened and turned to the crowd. "The boy needs resources, tools, components, hands willing to help. Who will volunteer?" Dozens of hands shot into the air. Ethan blinked in disbelief. For so long, he had been the quiet tinkerer no one noticed. Now all eyes were on him. Elder Moran struck his staff on the floor, silencing the chatter. "If we do this, we risk everything. The eastern wastes hold the parts you need, but that place is cursed. Sandstorms, sinkholes, predators, no place for a child." "I'm not a child," Ethan said, his jaw tightening. "I can handle it." "You won't handle it alone," Landara cut in before anyone else could speak. "I'll go with him." "Herr." Father, Councilman Tinari, stepped forward in protest, his lavender face darkening. "Landra, no. The wastes are no place for you. I forbid it." She met his gaze unflinching. I'm 16. I am an adult by our tradition. And I trust Ethan. The room erupted in debate, voices clashing like thunder. But in the end, necessity won. Without water, the settlement would die. The council approved a small expedition. Ethan, Landara, and 2 guards, 1 human. 1 Neridian would leave at dawn. The following morning, the twin suns were barely rising when Ethan tightened the straps on his dusty pack. He had stuffed it with scavenged tools, spare wiring, and the prototype generator wrapped in cloth. His heart pounded as he glanced toward the eastern gate. Landara stood waiting, her protective desert cloak draped over her shoulders, her silver braid tucked under a hood. She smiled when she saw him, and something inside him eased. They set out, the desert stretching before them like an endless ocean of rust-colored sand. Every step carried them further from safety, further into a landscape that seemed alive with danger. The human guard Marcos checked his energy rifle with grim efficiency. "Stay close," he muttered. "Sandstorms can come out of nowhere. Out here, and if the predators don't get you, the ground itself might." The first hours passed in silence except for the crunch of sand under boots. By midday, the heat was brutal, the air shimmering like molten glass. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow and adjusted his goggles. Landara glanced at him, her face calm. Despite the oppressive heat, "Your human skin," she said, "it burns so easily." "Yeah, well, we weren't built for twin suns," he replied with a faint grin. They crested a dune, and Marcos raised a hand, signaling for everyone to stop. Kel, the Neridian guard, pointed ahead. Movement. 3 o'clock. Ethan's breath caught as shapes emerged from behind a cluster of rocks. Figures tall and lean, with skin the color of burnished copper, marked with swirling patterns that seemed to shimmer in the light. They carried spears tipped with crystalline blades and moved with the silence of predators. Terrari nomads, Kel muttered under his breath. They don't usually come this close to the trade routes. The figures halted a short distance away, their leader stepping forward. His presence was commanding, his eyes sharp and calculating. "You trespass on Terrari grounds," he said, in accented common. "State your purpose or return to where you came from." Ethan's instincts screamed at him to stay silent, but something deeper, a stubbornness inherited from his father, pushed him forward. "I'm Ethan Harper of Drywell Settlement," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "Where?" "Searching for parts in the old shipyard. We're building a machine to make water." The leader's expression didn't change, but his eyes glinted with interest. "Water?" "Not stolen, not traded," Ethan said, holding up his prototype. "Made from the air itself." A murmur ran through the Terrari group. Their leader, Chief Noreen, tilted his head slightly. "Show us," he said. Ethan glanced at Landara, who gave a small nod. With careful hands, he set the prototype on the sand, powered it on, and waited. As the familiar hum filled the still air, the Terrari warriors leaned closer, curiosity overtaking suspicion. When the first droplets of water appeared in the small reservoir, a collective gasp escaped them. Chief Narin crouched, touching the liquid with a reverence Ethan hadn't expected. "The boy makes water from the breath of the desert," he said softly. Then, rising, he looked at Ethan with newfound respect. "You will come with us. We will guide you through the wastes, in exchange for the knowledge of your water-making." Ethan glanced at Landara, who smiled faintly, her violet eyes glowing. For the first time, he felt they might not just survive this journey. They might change everything. The Terrari camp was like nothing Ethan had ever seen. Nestled within a crescent of towering sandstone spires, it blended so seamlessly into the desert that they might have walked past it if Chief Noreen hadn't guided them there. Tents woven from fibers the color of burnt copper swayed lightly in the wind. their surfaces painted with intricate swirling patterns that mirrored the tattoos on the nomad's skin. The air smelled faintly of roasted herbs and smoke, a sharp contrast to the sterile dryness of Drywell. The settlement seemed alive with quiet motion. Women with long copper braids prepared food over open fires, while children, their faces marked with playful streaks of white paint, darted around them like desert foxes. Ethan felt their eyes on him, wide and curious, and for a fleeting moment, he realized how strange he must look to them, pale-skinned, dust-streaked, his hands still clutching the bundle of scavenged parts he'd refused to leave behind. Landara walked beside him with her usual confident stride, though he could see her taking it all in too. "They don't seem hostile," she murmured softly. "Not yet," Marcos muttered, hand resting on the grip of his energy rifle. Chief Noreen stopped in front of a larger tent, its entrance decorated with bone chimes that rattled gently in the breeze. "You will rest here," he announced. "The desert does not forgive those who rush. We travel at dawn." His deep, gravelly voice carried the weight of both authority and something else, respect. Ethan swallowed and nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Thank you for helping us." Naren's gaze lingered on him for a moment. "Watermaker," he said, tasting the words as though they were foreign. "You will show my people this." "Magic. It's not magic," Ethan said with a nervous smile. "Just science, a lot of trial and error." Naren's lips curved in the faintest hint of amusement. "Science or magic, it matters little. To the desert, water is life, and you have made life appear from thin air. That is power worth understanding." As evening fell, the camp gathered around a low fire pit in the center of their circle. Ethan and Landara sat close, their shadows cast long against the sand. The flames painted Landara's lavender skin in warm gold tones, making her violet eyes look almost otherworldly. An elder woman approached them, her copper skin wrinkled with age and experience. Beads and charms adorned her hair, clinking softly. As she moved, "I am Sapa," she said, her voice like wind against stone. "Keeper of seeds, keeper of memory." She held out her palm, revealing a small pouch filled with tiny, dust-colored seeds. "Our people have carried these for generations. They were once the food of our ancestors before the great drying turned the world to dust." She turned her sharp gaze on Ethan. "With your water, they could live again." Ethan took the pouch carefully, as though it were something sacred. "I'll try," he promised, though he wasn't sure if his technology could give life to something so ancient. Sapa's smile was cryptic but kind. The desert does not reward those who do not try. Later, as the fire burned low and the stars of Tarar lit the sky like scattered shards of ice, Landara leaned closer to Ethan. "You know they're starting to look at you differently," she said. "What do you mean?" he asked, adjusting the pouch of seeds in his hands. "Like, you're not just a boy anymore. Like you're someone important." She tilted her head, studying his face with an intensity that made his stomach flutter. "When you turned on that generator today, even I didn't believe it would work. But you made water from air, Ethan. That's more than anyone here could dream of." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, trying to deflect the compliment. "I just don't want to see everyone give up. My dad always said there's no problem you can't solve if you keep working at it." His voice softened. "I think he'd be proud of this." Landara's expression softened too, and for a moment there was nothing but the quiet crackle of the fire between them. She reached out and placed a hand over his, the gesture simple but grounding. "I think he'd be proud of you," she said. But the peace of the night did not last. Long after the camp had settled into sleep, Ethan awoke to a strange sound, a low mechanical hum that didn't belong to the desert or the nomads. He sat up, heart pounding, straining to listen. The sound grew louder, followed by the crunch of heavy metal on sand. Landara stirred beside him, her instincts just as sharp. "What is it?" she whispered. "I don't know," Ethan said. Grabbing his pack and crawling out of the tent. At the edge of the camp, the shadows moved, dark silhouettes with glinting armor. A group of unknown raiders, their vehicles bristling with mounted weapons, was moving fast toward the camp's perimeter. The sight of their red, glowing insignias made Ethan's stomach drop. Whoever they were, they weren't friendly. Chief Narin was already awake, barking orders in the Terrari language. Warriors rushed to form a defensive circle, spears crackling, with the faint blue energy of primitive stun tech. Marcos cursed under his breath as he powered up his rifle. "Get behind me, boy," Marcos said, but Ethan barely heard him. His gaze was fixed on the approaching vehicles, and a thought surged through his mind like lightning. They weren't here by chance. Someone had told them. Someone knew about the water generator. Landara's hand gripped his arm. "Ethan," she said, her voice low and urgent. "They're coming for us, for you." The first blast of energy fire ripped across the sand, sending a shower of sparks into the night. The battle for survival had begun. The sun rose over the eastern wastes like a pair of molten eyes, glaring down at the aftermath of the night's chaos. Smoke rose in thin columns from the raider skiffs, now reduced to scorched wrecks half buried in the sand. Ethan stood near one of the destroyed vehicles, the acrid stench of burnt metal filling his nostrils as he examined the shattered plating. Whoever these raiders were, they weren't scavengers. Their weapons were too advanced, their tactics too coordinated. This was no random attack. Someone had sent them. Someone who knew what they were carrying. Landara walked up beside him, her hood down, her silver hair catching the morning light. "You're thinking the same thing I am," she said, her tone grim. Ethan nodded. "Vex Corp." The name felt bitter on his tongue. "It has to be them. Word about the water generator must have spread. They want to take it before we can finish building the larger version." Chief Narin approached, his copper skin streaked with the dust of battle but his posture unbroken. "Your enemies are persistent," he said, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "But the desert has taught us that persistence can be defeated by cunning. We will see you safely to the shipyard. Beyond that, your fight is your own." Ethan looked up at him, seeing not just a nomadic leader, but a man who understood survival better than anyone. "Then we'll need all the cunning we can get," Ethan said. By midday, they reached the edge of the old shipyard, a sprawling graveyard of derelict starships half swallowed by the desert. The twisted hulks jutted from the sand like the bones of ancient giants, their hulls riddled with scorch marks from wars long forgotten. The air was heavy with the scent of rust and ozone. "This place gives me the creeps," Marcos muttered, tightening his grip on his rifle as he scanned the dunes. "Half of these ships are held together by sand and prayers. One wrong step and we'll be buried alive." "Then step carefully," Landara said, shooting him a pointed look. Ethan felt his pulse quicken as he surveyed the wreckage. His mind was already racing with possibilities. Somewhere in this graveyard were the components he needed: high capacity condensers, power regulators, maybe even hydrostatic amplifiers if he was lucky. But the danger was real. The shipyard skeletons weren't just unstable. Rumors spoke of automated defense drones. Old military A is left to rot but still active, protecting the dead ships from intruders. As if on cue, the silence shattered with a metallic screech that echoed off the broken hulls. Ethan froze. From the shadow of a shattered freighter, a mechanical form unfolded, its limbs clicking as it stepped into view. The thing was humanoid, though its rusted plating and faded insignia marked it as something built centuries ago. Its single optical lens glowed red, scanning the intruders. Unauthorized access detected. The machine droned, its voice distorted and harsh. "Trespassers will be neutralized. Damn it, one of the guardians. Marcos shouted, raising his rifle. Wait! Ethan snapped, holding out a hand. If we fire on it, the others might activate. There's got to be another way. But the machine was already advancing, its servos whining as it charged an energy bolt in its chest. Landara grabbed Ethan's arm. Move, she hissed, pulling him just as the bolt slammed into the sand where he had been standing. The blast sent shards of glass-like debris flying through the air. Chief Noreen barked an order to his warriors, who scattered and began circling the guardian with practiced agility. Our spears cannot pierce its armor, he growled, but we can distract it. Boy, find its heart. Ethan's mind raced as he dove behind the shattered hull of a nearby shuttle. Find its heart. Find its heart. He closed his eyes for a split second, recalling the diagrams he had studied in salvage technical manuals. If this Guardian was anything like the Tresian models he'd seen before, its power core would be housed in its back, protected by a failsafe casing. If he could just get close enough, I'll need a diversion, he muttered. Landara appeared beside him, crouched low. Tell me what to do. Throw something shiny, anything, toward its right side. I'll hit the back panel. Without hesitation, she yanked a silver medallion from her neck and hurled it into the sand. The Guardian's red eye whirred, tracking the sudden glint. That was all the time Ethan needed. He sprinted forward, sliding across the sand, and jammed his salvaged flux regulator into a seam in the machine's armor. The makeshift tool sparked, discharging raw energy directly into the core. The Guardian convulsed, letting out a shriek of mechanical feedback before collapsing in a heap of scorched metal. Smoke hissed from its joints. Ethan lay on his back, panting, as Landara rushed over. You're insane, she said, though her voice carried both relief and admiration. Yeah, he breathed, grinning weakly, but it worked. For hours. They scavenged the shipyard, dismantling what they could from the broken vessels. By evening, they had collected enough components to build something powerful, something that could change Drywell's fate forever. As they loaded the parts onto their sled, Ethan caught Landara watching him. She didn't look away when their eyes met. You know, she said softly, my people have a saying. The one who finds water in the desert is destined to lead others. To it, Ethan's cheeks flushed. I'm not a leader. I just don't like watching people suffer. That's why you'll lead, she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. But their moment was cut short by Marcus's sudden shout. We've got company. Ethan turned to see a black drone streaking across the horizon, its wings glinting like knives in the dying sunlight. It bore the unmistakable hexagonal insignia of Vex Corp. They found us, Landara whispered, her voice tight. Ethan's stomach dropped. He tightened his grip on the salvaged parts. If Vex Corp knew they were here, they wouldn't just let them walk back to Drywell. They'd take everything by force, if necessary. Get ready, Ethan said, his voice harder now, the voice of someone who understood what was at stake. We're not losing this. The return to Drywell felt different this time. The moment Ethan, Landara, and their guards crossed the eastern gate with the salvaged parts piled high on their sled, the settlement seemed to come alive. People gathered in the dusty streets, murmuring as they caught sight of the boy with windswept blonde hair carrying salvaged technology like treasure. Children with hollow eyes stared in awe, whispering Watermaker as if it were already a legend. Ethan tried to ignore the stares, focusing instead on the bundle of wires and regulators that could mean the difference between survival and death. For all of them, but not everyone shared the joy of their return. Standing on the steps of the council hall, Elder Moran watched them with his arms crossed, his sharp features shadowed by suspicion. His lavender skin seemed pale in the rising heat, but his violet eyes burned with an emotion Ethan couldn't place envy, perhaps, or fear. When Ethan and Landara hauled their salvaged haul into the council chamber, Moran's expression did not soften. "You risked lives for scrap," Moran said coldly as Ethan unloaded the parts onto a table. "One wrong move in the shipyard, and the desert would have claimed you. And for what? A child's experiment?" "It's not just an experiment," Ethan shot back. His voice, once timid in front of the council, carried a surprising strength. "With these components, I can build a generator that will produce enough water for crops, for drinking, for life. I saw what our settlement could become while I was out there, and I'm not going to let fear stop us." Councilman Holt rose to his feet. "The boy is right. We all saw what his prototype could do. It's time we stop talking about rationing and start thinking about building something lasting." Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. Even some of the Neridian elders nodded quietly, but Moran's gaze narrowed further. "And when the outsiders hear of this miracle machine? When traders and scavengers come to take it? What will we do then?" His voice dropped, heavy and deliberate. "The desert is cruel, but greed is crueler." Within days, Ethan's larger generator began to take shape in the center of Drywell. With Landara by his side, he worked from sunrise until long past sunset, hands raw and bleeding as he pieced together the salvaged regulators, solar coils, and reinforced pumps. He felt the entire settlement's eyes on him, half filled with hope, half with doubt, but it was Landara who grounded him. When he hesitated, she handed him tools without a word. When exhaustion set in, her quiet confidence kept him standing. One evening, as they soldered the final connections, Landara wiped sweat from her brow and looked at him with something almost like pride. "You've built something no one thought possible," she said softly. "Even me." Ethan felt his heart lurch at the honesty in her voice. He wanted to respond, but before he could, a distant hum of engines broke the moment. The sound was alien to Drywell, smooth, mechanical, and far too refined for their settlement. Both Ethan and Landara froze, exchanging a look of alarm. By the next morning, they had their answer. A convoy of sleek vehicles rolled into view on the horizon, their black hulls gleaming with the hexagonal insignia of Vex Corp. They moved with the precision of predators, kicking up swirls of red dust as they approached. At their head was a transport unlike anything Ethan had seen before: polished steel, corporate logos etched in silver, and armored escorts that made no attempt to hide their weapons. The council gathered at the eastern gate, the settlers lining the fence with a mix of fear and curiosity. From the lead transport emerged a tall, imposing figure with iridescent scales that shimmered like oil under the twin suns. Director Prell, Vex Corp's regional head, smiled in a way that didn't reach his cold reptilian eyes. His presence alone was enough to silence the crowd. "Esteemed settlers of Drywell," Prell began, his voice smooth as polished glass, "what you have accomplished here is impressive. Water where there was none, life pulled from death. But such technology is too valuable to be left in the hands of, how shall I say, amateurs." His gaze swept over the crowd, settling briefly on Ethan with a look that felt like a scalpel cutting through his skin. "Vex Corp proposes a partnership. We provide protection, resources, infrastructure. In return, you share the designs of your machine with us. It's not for sale," Ethan said before anyone else could speak. His voice rang out, breaking the tension like a stone through glass. Prell's smile sharpened. "I admire your spirit, boy. But understand this, if you don't accept our offer, others will come. And they will not be as diplomatic." He gestured casually to the armed guards behind him. The implication was clear. That night, the settlement buzzed with whispers and unease. Half of the council seemed tempted by Prell's offer, swayed by his promises of wealth and safety. Elder Moran, in particular, argued passionately for accepting reality. claiming Drywell would be destroyed if they refused. Ethan, furious, stormed out of the meeting, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles ached. Landara followed him to the workshop, her face hard but her eyes soft with concern. "You can't let him scare you," she said, leaning against the doorway as Ethan hunched over his tools. "Prell doesn't care about this settlement. He just wants what you built." Ethan looked up at her, his face shadowed by the single flickering light in the workshop. "If they take the generator, everything we've done here, everything we've built, it'll mean nothing." Landara stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "Then we fight to protect it. You've given people hope, Ethan. That's something worth defending." He met her gaze, the closeness of her presence sending an unfamiliar heat through him. "You really think we can stand against them?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You forget, dirt boy. I've been standing with you since the day you built that little machine out of trash. I'm not about to stop now." But before they could finish their conversation, a sudden alarm shattered the night. The sharp wail of the settlement siren sent panic rippling through the streets. Ethan and Landara raced outside, where they saw smoke rising from the eastern sector. "Generator 2 is offline," a guard shouted. "Sabotage!" Ethan's blood went cold. As he sprinted toward the site, he saw the damaged precision strikes to the coolant systems, just enough to cripple the machine without destroying it. He didn't need to ask who was behind it. Vex Corp had made their move. And this was only the beginning. The night air over Drywell was charged with tension, like the stillness before a storm. The sabotage of Generator 2 had left the eastern crops gasping for water. And though Ethan and his team worked through the night to reroute the remaining systems, he couldn't shake the gnawing certainty that this was only the opening move. The settlement wasn't just vulnerable, it was being stalked by dawn. The council chamber was a storm of raised voices and trembling hands. Councilman Holt slammed his fist on the table. This was no accident. Someone fed Vex Corp the layout of our systems. They knew exactly where to strike. All eyes turned to Elder Moran. He stood tall, but there was something guarded in his expression, something that made Ethan's gut twist. "We cannot know who is responsible," Moran said smoothly. "But perhaps this is a sign. Vex Corp offers us relocation safety. Maybe it is time we consider their offer rather than inviting more destruction." "That's not safety," Ethan cut in, stepping forward. His voice was sharper than anyone had ever heard it. "That's surrender. They don't want to help us. They want to own us. We built this place from nothing. I won't let them tear it down." Prell's name hung unspoken in the air like a curse. The director had left the settlement the day before, but Ethan knew he would be back, and next time he wouldn't come with smiles and words. Later, in the quiet of the agricultural lab, Landara pulled Ethan into the shadows. Her face was pale. Beneath its lavender hue, her violet eyes wide with urgency. "I've been monitoring encrypted signals since Vex Corp arrived," she said, pulling up a series of data streams on a battered terminal. "Look at this." The screen flickered, displaying a series of transmissions between an unnamed contact inside Drywell and Prell's operatives. Promises of wealth and power in exchange for cooperation. Strategic leaks of system vulnerabilities. Ethan's jaw clenched as he scrolled through the messages. "Moran," he said, his voice cold. "It's him. It has to be." "We can't prove it yet," Landara warned, touching his arm. "If we go to the council with just this, he'll twist it. We need something undeniable, something that shows everyone exactly who he's working with." Ethan stared at the lines of code on the screen, his mind racing. "Then we'll get undeniable proof. But first, we make sure Vex Corp can't take anything from us." That evening, the tension broke. A dust storm rose from the horizon, but this wasn't the work of nature. Through the swirling sand, headlights appeared sleek vehicles in Vex Corp's black and chrome colors moving like predators circling prey. A siren wailed through Drywell as settlers scrambled for cover. From the lead transport, Director Prell stepped out, his iridescent scales glinting like liquid metal. Behind him, armed mercenaries fanned out, their rifles gleaming under the harsh light. His smile was a predator's grin. "People of Drywell," Prell called, his voice amplified by a sleek communicator. "We warned you. We offered you partnership, security, prosperity. Instead, you choose defiance. Defiance is expensive." He gestured casually, and one of his men fired a bolt of energy into a nearby storage shed. The explosion sent flames licking into the sky, casting terrified faces. In orange light, Ethan's heart hammered as he stood at the edge of the plaza, Landara by his side. Every instinct told him to fight, but he wasn't ready not yet. They needed a plan. The confrontation spilled into the council chamber. Prell stood at the center of the room like a serpent coiled to strike, his guards lining the walls with weapons barely concealed. Elder Moran sat beside him, not with the council but apart, his posture stiff, his eyes avoiding Ethan's gaze. "As I was saying," Prell began, his tone smooth and cutting, "your situation is precarious. A single machine fails and your entire settlement teeters on the edge of ruin. Vex Corp can change that. Relocation, advanced technology, protection. All we require is access to your little invention." Ethan stepped forward, holding something small and battered in his hands, his very first prototype. "You mean this?" he asked. Prell's eyes narrowed. "I do." "Then watch carefully." Ethan placed the device on the table and powered it on. The familiar hum filled the room, and mist began to curl into the reservoir. But this time, he pressed a hidden switch. A projection appeared above the device, a holographic display of the ground beneath Drywell. "You claimed there's novium ore beneath us," Ethan said, his voice steady and cold. "But this is the real scan. No ore, no fortune, just lies. You're not here for minerals. You're here for my technology." Gasps erupted around the chamber as Ethan's second projection appeared, Prell's encrypted transmissions with Moran, decoded and displayed for all to see. Moran's face drained of color. "This is absurd," Moran sputtered. "Fabrications." "He's a child. Who built the machines keeping you alive?" Ethan cut in. Prell's smile vanished. With a sharp gesture, his guards moved. "Weapons," hummed as they prepared to fire. "Enough," Prell hissed. "If we cannot have your machine, we will take it by force." The room exploded into chaos. Council members ducked for cover as energy bolts scorched the walls. From the shadows, Teravari nomads disguised among the settlers struck back, their primitive-looking weapons unleashing EMP pulses that disabled Vex Corp rifles. "Go!" Landara shouted, grabbing Ethan's arm. "We need to protect the generators." They ran through the chaos, heartbeats pounding in sync, until they reached the side corridor leading to the main control hub. As they caught their breath, Landara suddenly gripped his hand, her face tense with something more than fear. "Ethan," she said, her voice breaking, "there's something I have to tell you." "Not now," he replied, still catching his breath. "Now," she insisted, her hand pressing against her abdomen. "I'm pregnant with your child." For a moment, the battle raging outside felt distant and unreal. Ethan stared at her, stunned, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible. That's not even supposed to be possible." "Neither was making water from air," Landara said softly. "But here we are." The moment passed. In a heartbeat, as shouts echoed down the corridor, Vex Corp forces were regrouping. Ethan's shock hardened into something else, a fierce, unshakable resolve. He squeezed her hand. "Then we have even more to fight for," he said. "Come on." Outside, the plaza had become a battlefield. Settlers armed with improvised weapons fought alongside the Terrari nomads, who moved through the dust like shadows, setting traps that disabled Vex Corp's vehicles. Prell stood at the heart of the chaos, barking orders, his cold eyes scanning for Ethan. "They're heading for Generator 1. A voice cried over the comms. Ethan grabbed Landara's hand and sprinted, his mind racing with every possible contingency. If they lost the main generator, everything they'd built would die. But he had one last idea, an insane, desperate plan that just might turn the tide. The central plaza of Drywell burned with chaos as the storm of battle raged. Vex Corp's mercenaries, stripped of their polished corporate image, fought like cornered predators, their energy rifles spitting blue fire into the dusk. Settlers darted between barricades of overturned carts and broken panels, firing scavenged weapons or hurling improvised explosives. Above, the sky was streaked with smoke and the faint, shimmering haze of heat from the twin suns. The entire settlement seemed to tremble with the weight of its survival. From the roof of a maintenance hut, Ethan Harper surveyed the battlefield, every muscle tense. The air smelled of ozone and scorched metal, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. Landara crouched beside him, her silver hair tangled and streaked with dust, her violet eyes fierce and focused. "They're pushing toward the main generator," she said, pointing to the dark line of mercenaries advancing like a swarm. "If they disable it, the crops will die within days." "Not happening," Ethan replied, his jaw tight. He glanced toward the horizon where the towering silhouette of Generator 1 stood like a sentinel, its solar panels gleaming under the dying light. "If they want it, they'll have to go through me." Landara placed a hand on his shoulder. "Through us?" she corrected firmly. Her gaze locked onto his, unyielding. "We fight together, dirt boy. We always have." Ethan's mind raced. The generator was more than a water machine. It was a technological heart that tied the entire settlement together. Its systems could manipulate atmospheric moisture on a localized scale. He had never pushed it beyond its intended limits, but now he saw only one path: to weaponize it, to make the sky itself their shield. He tapped his communicator. "Ren, are you in the control hub?" "Yeah, but the mercs are getting close." Ren's voice crackled through the channel. "We're running out of time." "Then listen carefully," Ethan said, his voice low but resolute. "I need you to initiate protocol terraform. All atmospheric modules at full power." There was silence for a beat. "Ethan, that's never been tested. You could fry the system." "Do it," Ethan cut in. "If we don't stop them now, there won't be anything left to save." Landara and Ethan raced through the narrow streets, past the frightened faces of settlers who had once doubted the boy tinkerer and now looked at him as their last hope. They burst into the control hub just as Ren's trembling fingers hovered over the console. "Once I hit this," Ren said, "we can't shut it down until the cycle's complete." "Hit it," Ethan said without hesitation. The hum of the generators grew, a sound so deep it resonated in their bones. Outside, the clear sky darkened as moisture was ripped from the air and condensed into heavy clouds. A strange amber rain began to fall, splattering against metal and sand. "What the hell is this?" a mercenary shouted as the rain touched his armor, sizzling faintly. Energy weapons sparked and died, circuits shorting out in an instant. One by one, Vex Corp's rifles went dead. Panic spread through their ranks. Some tried to retreat, only to be met by Terravari warriors emerging from the dunes, their spears crackling with low-energy charges that stunned the mercenaries with pinpoint precision. Ethan and Landara stepped out into the plaza as the tide turned. Director Prell stood at the center, his scales slick under the strange rain, his expression unreadable. "You think this will save you?" Prell shouted over the chaos. "Your children playing with fire." That machine is worth more than this entire settlement. You can't stop progress." "This isn't progress," Ethan said, his voice steady and cutting. "This is life. And we're done letting you steal it." The final confrontation came swift and brutal. Prell lunged forward, his claws glinting as he grabbed Ethan by the collar, hissing in his face. "You think you've won? You've made enemies you can't even imagine." Before Ethan could respond, Landara slammed her staff into Prell's side with the force of a storm, knocking him to the ground. Settlers rushed in, restraining the corporate director as Teravari warriors rounded up the remaining mercenaries. The rain slowed, and silence fell over Drywell. For a moment, no one moved, as if afraid to believe they had survived. Then the cheer rose a ragged, defiant sound that swelled until the whole settlement echoed with it. Ethan looked at Landara, chest heaving, every nerve in his body alive with adrenaline. "It's over," he said, almost disbelieving. She shook her head, her hand finding his. "No, Ethan, it's just beginning." Weeks later, Vex Corp's forces were long gone, humiliated and disgraced. Evidence of their sabotage and Moram's betrayal had been transmitted to the Galactic Confederation, ensuring no corporation would dare touch Drywell again. Elder Moran, stripped of his authority, now worked under guard in the settlement's fields, sowing the very crops he once thought were doomed. Drywell was no longer Drywell. The settlers, humans, Neridians, and Terraria alike renamed it New Terrara, living tribute to what they had built together. Irrigation channels ran like silver veins through fields of green, and Ethan's upgraded generators hummed like the lifeblood of the desert. Ethan stood on the observation platform, watching the sunset bleed across the horizon. Landara joined him, her hand brushing against his. She was visibly pregnant now, her rounded belly a miracle that neither science nor tradition could explain. "You still can't believe it, can you?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "I can't believe any of this. A few years ago, I was just a kid messing with scrap. Now?" He looked at her, his voice lowering. "Now I'm going to be a father." Landara's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Narin," she said. "That's what I want to name him. After Chief Narin, he gave us the courage to survive." Ethan's eyes softened. "Narin Harper," he said, testing the name on his tongue. "I like it." The day Narin was born, the entire colony gathered. A boy with his father's bright blue eyes and his mother's lavender skin, he was a living symbol of unity, of a future that defied the impossible. As Ethan held his son, he realized something profound. His greatest invention wasn't the generator that had saved the settlement. It was this future, the family he had built, the world he had reshaped with determination and hope. Landara leaned her head against his shoulder as they watched the twin suns dip below the horizon, casting new terrar in golden light. "You know," she whispered, "when I first called you Dirt Boy, I never thought you'd grow into the man who would make the desert bloom." Ethan chuckled softly, kissing the top of her head. "And I never thought I'd find someone like you out here." They stood there, together, as the generators hummed in the background, a sound that had once been the whisper of survival but was now the song of a thriving world. For Ethan Harper, the boy who built water from air, the future had only just begun.